I'm not here to tell anybody else that's how they should run their organization. What is clear to me is if I'm in a meeting and somebody's struggling, I know I can see them and I can catch them in the hallway after, like, hey, are you okay? It seems like something's bugging you, right? We can have those. If we're in Zoom calls all day, am I going to Slack you? Hey, can we do a Zoom call after the Zoom call? So I got a question, and you know how hard it is to have the relationships, how hard it is to get out of your own head and see what's going on for other people.
Okay, folks, here we go. Welcome to this iteration of Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. This is MK Palmore, CEO and founder of Apogee Global RMS. And I am here today with Raman Ohri, who is the CEO of SEP. Raman and I had the benefit of overlapping and interacting during an industry event. And over dinner, I found some of the conversations that we had about his role as the CEO at SEP, that and leadership to be absolutely fascinating. And I wanted to bring the audience in on that conversation. So Raman, welcome to the virtual studio. Nice to have you in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, MK.
So first, tell us, SEP, software development company in the state of Indiana. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do there at SEP.
So we're a custom software design and development shop. And so, if you get past the buzzwords, we help other people build their products. They might be internal, they might be external. They're usually on the high complexity side, though, with safety critical, regulatory, and so on.
So a highly technical workforce, is that a fair assumption to?
That is a very accurate assumption.
All right, highly technical workforce. And you have been employed there at SEP since graduating from college, if I remember correctly, right?
That's right. I wish I could tell you that it was some incredible insight on 21-year-old me, but the reality was I graduated during a recession from a great school with good grades, and it was just tough to get a job. And this is where I ended up. I don't know, maybe there's a parable there about making the best of what you arrive at.
Well, let's tease out a little bit, though. You went to a rather well-regarded engineering college, Rose Holman Institute of Technology there in Indiana. You matriculated. I guess there was a bit of a feeder system there. First of all, a well-regarded undergraduate engineering program. Was there a feeder system into SEP, or were they, or most organizations and companies there in Indiana looking for graduates from this particular school?
At that point, that was 1993. Rose was still, I would say, a best kept secret. And so there was definitely a feeder into SEP because the four founders were Rose grads. Okay. So they knew. Very quickly, as software ate the world there in the 90s, companies started to figure out that this was a good resource and started recruiting very heavily, to the point now where the career fair it's a competitive affair to get a spot to go recruit. Yeah.
Right. Outstanding. So at the time that you joined the company, had the founders already created what you might consider to be a company culture? How long had the organization been around by the time you joined?
It had been around 5 years, and I think I was employee 18 approximately. And the culture then is not the culture now, but I would say it's a yes and over those 36 years. And they really set the foundational pieces well, one of which was just a focus on doing great work. And that sounds like the simplest goal in the world. Doesn't everybody do that? Well, in practice, all of us who work know sometimes, no, we don't. We focus on growing, or we focus on generating revenue, or we focus on a lifestyle. But they did a really nice job of locking us in on, we're going to build great software. We're going to do great work that we're proud of. And then everything kind of fell out of that.
How would you say that the culture of the organization has evolved? I assume keeping that original principle in mind.
I don't know how much to credit as an intentional decision versus what evolved, but what you would see today if you walked around our place is a lot of people who are early career. We still hire many, many people fresh out of school, about 2/3 of our hires, sitting next to a 15-year vet, a 20-year vet, a 25-year vet, and many of them 20 years here, which is, as you know, is very unusual in tech.
Right.
So this come here and grow and learn, and now turn around and invest in the next person and bring them into what we have. is a thing. I don't know that it was obvious if it was an intent of the founders, but it has become a very strong part of our culture.
So I want to stick with this for a minute because this is part of the conversation, pre-conversation that you and I had that I thought was super, super interesting. This idea of investing in talent, like you look for probably some critical skills, maybe levels of accomplishment when you bring new folks on, but you are already understanding that you intend to invest years of work, excellence, upskilling into the personnel. And I assume that has to result in lots of different things. What are maybe some of the dividends or benefits that come from this investment in talent?
Several. I've seen, the tech industry has ebbed and flowed in terms of demand, but there have been many points over the last 20 years where it's been exceptionally difficult to find talent, to grow people, to find people to hire and grow your business. And if you don't have a well-developed muscle to bring people along, then your only option is to find fully formed people. Right. And I'm laughing on the inside to say fully formed. Like this is the name of the podcast is Leadership Student. And we know this is the work of a lifetime, right?
Right.
Developing yourself. Right. But in terms of the technical skills to do the job, you are really constrained if you cannot grow people in that regard. You're also at the whim of how other people train someone. So if you have a particular way that you think is more effective or that is a better fit for your context, for your customers, and you have to unlearn from new hires, like it just slows down the process. That's all on the output side. There's a cultural side though too. Like we see about 95% annual retention year over year from the life of the company.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's very unusual. Yeah. And so I believe a part of that is, at least subconsciously, people understand I am not just a machine to be picked up and used and tossed aside. I am a part of this. I am growing this thing. This thing is growing me. And that sort of mutually beneficial relationship creates some stickiness.
Wow. I mean, stickiness might be an understatement. I think a 95% retention rate year over year is probably unheard of certainly across the technology space. My experience in the short time that I've been deeply embedded in it is a high turnover rate and a seeking that folks are looking for that cultural balance, pay balance, quality of life balance, and ability to impact, the quality of the work. All of that has to sort of be in a symbiotic relationship with one another. And it's rare, I think, to find that across the technology space. And it sounds like you guys might have hit on it. Did you participate at all in sort of creating what I would consider to be, you have to have a playbook for development of incoming personnel. Over the years, have you participated in sort of building out what that development cycle looks like for personnel?
I have, but I want to be careful not to sort of claim an outsized credit for that.
No,
there are many people. And in fact, I'll give you an anecdote. There was a point about 2 years ago where I had to get a bunch of leaders in a room and say, all of you are running some sort of new hire program, whether it be a new hire mentorship or guide program or a teaching software skills or teaching leadership skills, or like, okay, we need to just lay out, this is too much. We're throwing so much at new hires. They don't have any time to actually do the work. So let's make sure we're not duplicating any effort. But yes. So sorry, that's a very long answer to a simple question. I have been involved.
No, but I think it's important. What you described is sort of this thing that might have occurred naturally or organically among the leaders, all of them understanding that, hey, I got to create a program to make sure that these folks learn what they need to learn, that they get engaged as quickly as they feasibly can, and that they get up to speed in doing the work in the way and manner that our company wants them to do it. And so you come in and you say, we probably need to streamline this and probably standardize it across the various domains and programs. I'm sure a lot of work went into that. Can you describe maybe over a development cycle, like what that might look like? Who do you gather to ensure that you're taking into account opinions, considerations, but building something that you think is going to be sustainable?
Yeah, I probably need to give a little bit of background. So we're building these products. We're doing these projects for customers. So there's this very powerful atomic unit, which is the team that is working on the project for a customer, and they're not generally multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a mission that we're doing for a customer. This team forms around it. They do it. That is almost everybody in the building. There is an ops group that is supporting them, pay the bills, keep the roof over our head, IT, things like that. Everybody else is doing that. And so leaders in our company emerge often unsolicited. They will detect a pain point. They feel a sense of ownership, and they have enough freedom to carve out a little bit of their schedule to go try to tackle a problem. And so that had sprung up. And so the people who I brought in the room that day, one was somebody who leads recruiting, but it was also a manager, was also a developer. Another is our director of software engineering, who is down in the trenches every day with teams, advising them on how to get better, and learning what they're encountering in the field, to architects to see. So it was a cross section of people who are active practitioners.
Right.
So first step, it'll sound trivial. Like first step was, can we just map out what everybody's doing? Because I don't know that we have good clarity. And you know how it is. Like when you have an evolutionary program, or organic, maybe a better way to say it, you detect an issue, you set up the system, you start doing. Sometimes we lose track of what was the purpose. Was my goal in this thing? And so we got real clear on the goals, and everybody got to share where it was. And we looked for overlap, and we looked for just what is a reasonable expectation, and started to space it out. But it was a very collaborative. We're not a command and control kind of group. We have a lot of smart people in the building. Right. It would be very limiting to limit us to my vision. Always got to be my way.
So you bring up an excellent point. You're surrounded probably at many levels with extremely intelligent talent. How do you create a culture and an environment where folks have the opportunity to engage, voice their opinions, but at the end of the day, some decision making needs to happen and a direction needs to be chosen? What's that look like on the ground for you guys as a team?
We'll go back to that atomic unit. That group that is delivering for a customer, within the bounds of that team, there is a lead. There might be multiple leads in sub-teams, but there is a group. They have a mission. They know what to do. In our case, it's often at least framed out by a contract, and they're going to go execute on that. Mm-hmm. And,
that's the tip of the spear, right?
Yeah. Yep. But let's not lose track. That is the value delivery. I am not important to a customer. I don't matter as far as if somebody comes to hire us. Now, what matters is Nate, their team lead, and his team delivering day to day. And so we optimize the rest of the organization around that to support that.
Okay.
Now I'm kind of drifting maybe off of the question. That group has a lot of autonomy. They're going to go towards that mission. They know what the boundaries are in terms of, well, I need another person, or we need to spend money on a tooling, or I need some infrastructure change. They know where to go to get that stuff. So they're running, and day to day, they don't need me. And the rest of us are thinking about what's next. How do we make sure that we have the skills to be fit for the market? So what do we see coming? And in this business, it's changing every day.
Right.
What deficiencies do we have in execution? So are our leaders prepared when they step into those leadership roles? Or do we need to do more education there, or more support? Do we have the tools we need to do the job? And so on. And so those systems are working in the background, getting feedback, and there's a lot of autonomy in that.
Would you consider yourself to be fairly aspirational? And the reason I ask that is that when you joined the organization back in 1993, did you join it thinking, "Hey, I'm going to invest, spend the time here, and maybe work my way up the ladder," or was it just sort of, "Here's an opportunity, I'll take advantage of, and I'll see where it goes," or maybe a little bit of both?
No, I'm laughing because I can see in retrospect what an idiot I was at 21, as most of us are, especially the males. We come so far. I'm laughing because the end of my interview at SEP, the president called me in his office, and then he asked me some standard questions, and he gave me the "where do you see yourself in X years?" And I thought it was what I was supposed to say, MK. I thought it was what I was supposed to say. So I leaned in and I said, "I want your job." And the closer I got to his job, the less I wanted his job. You know, so no. Actually, this was again. The more I understood what it meant, the more the engineer inside is perfectly happy to just put me in front of a computer. Let's go build some stuff. And it probably is helpful in me fitting into this culture because I'm naturally wired for servant leadership, and that sounds very arrogant as it comes out of my mouth. But that I don't need this to be about me. They are the show. You know, when these teams go out and nail it for the customer, they're the show. So what do I need to do to put them in a position to succeed? And I live for that. I love it. They love it, and it's a real symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. There's got to be some benefit, though, for a CEO to understand an organization at its core, having worked at the various levels. That has to, I believe, contribute to your ability to then, from a strategic standpoint, guide execution because you've done the work at the entry level all the way through. Is that a fair statement?
Extremely, yeah. And so at those various levels I'm describing, that atomic unit, I've been an individual contributor, I've been a team lead, and then I've been a manager, which for us, they build relationships. If an opportunity presents itself, they pursue it. And if they land it, they have to deliver it. So they're in a support role. So I've sort of done all those jobs. Mm-hmm. And I won't say I was the best at any of those jobs. The whole point is to hire people better than you, right? To take those things on. But yes, I've been in the trench. I understand what it's like to do those things. And quite often, I think you get an efficiency in communication. Somebody talks about a problem, and I can ask questions, but I don't have to ask all the questions.
Right. So let me pose a question to you, and I don't know the answer to this from your vantage point, but I'll describe to you a challenge I felt. I think I told you I spent a career in the Federal Bureau of Investigation as an investigator, a special agent. The first 7 to 8 years of my time in the organization was spent at the ground level investigating cases. I subsequently went into management formally and spent the rest of my career as a management and then subsequently an executive in the organization. As I look back on my career, if I'm being fully transparent and honest, the best time I had at that organization, at the FBI, was as a street level special agent and investigator. And then from my vantage point, the thing got exponentially harder and less fun, I will say, the more I went into the management ranks. Is there a similar feel? Does the engineer in you sort of miss the simplification of the days when you were just on a project, grinding, engaging, and not having to worry about sort of all this peripheral strategic adjacencies?
100%. 100%. I often joke, I've run out of jobs. There's no more
right.
If we're moving up. And so can I just reincarnate at the bottom as a bottom? I hate that sounds terrible as I say it. Can I reincarnate as a software engineer and start over? Yeah, I love the craft. And I think I don't think it's any different for you as an agent. It doesn't matter what you do. Like you probably got into a profession because you love the craft itself. Right. And then many of us, it's almost a vacuum. We get pulled into leadership because somebody's got to do it. Right. And, I want to see us succeed. I want to take care of people. I guess it'll be me.
Yeah, very, very similar. Very similar. That's interesting.
So, I think the trick, MK, is to engage the part of us that loved being an engineer or being an agent and to try to find that version in wherever you are. So I'll give you my example. I have no formal business training. I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business. I didn't take a single business class. I didn't even take an economics class. So you can imagine how many conversations I have walked into and I am clueless, talking to a banker, talking to finance folks, and I'm just listening, I'm taking notes, but the engineer part of my brain kicks in. Well, what's a system? How does this work? What are people's incentives? How do you optimize it? What part of this should I care about? Where are the risks? And when I can turn that part on, it's still not as fun as being an engineer, but it's more fun.
No, but I think you offer, at the very least, maybe again, a tool for those of us who are in these various professions to sort of reach back to that original thing that lit the fire inside of you, and try as best you can to incorporate that into your new experiences. And it may not be a one-for-one match, but maybe from an analogous standpoint, you can tease out those elements that were important to you. I like to think that most of my career has been around the idea of service. And so I think about how I align to this need that I have inside of me to serve others. And then I try and amplify that through the various things I do in the technology space. And for me, that really revolves around leadership and taking the handle on issues that I think ultimately end up serving others, which I think is just it's the thing that fuels me.
Can I ask you a question? I know you're the
Sure,
interviewer.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that with you. Like your two jobs. You served in the military.
I did. Yeah.
You served in the FBI, and then you went into the private sector, commercial tech.
Right.
And what went through my mind was such powerful purpose in those first two jobs. You never woke up confused
about what the mission was.
The purpose is so strong. And then in the commercial world, one might read the purpose as make money. And that is not, it does not pull the heart in the same way. How did you make that transition? How do you cope with that?
No, I just teased out part of the answer. I think I have to find the service element for me in whatever it is that I'm practicing. One example of this is, and I think I told you in an adjunct conversation, I lead a nonprofit in the technology space as well. And although I'm under contract with that nonprofit, it's very much a service-oriented thing. It's hard work. The leadership in the nonprofit space is the most challenging leadership challenge I've ever had during the course of my career because the incentives are wildly different. People have to be passionate about it, and you have to keep people engaged who aren't getting paid for much of the work that they're doing. And then you have to find others who are brought into your mission and are also passionate about it. Otherwise, they choose not to donate. They choose not to participate. They choose not to be a part of the whole thing. So oftentimes I wake up and why have I taken on this additional responsibility in addition to my day job of leading a nonprofit? And it all revolves around just helping people. I've seen how an individual can be impacted by the work that we do in the nonprofit space. And you amplify that to maybe it's several hundred. If you're lucky, it's several thousand individuals. And I see what kind of changes it has on people's lives. And I just think that's purposeful to me in terms of how I would like to spend my time. I don't know if I can do that for an extended period of time, especially because there's very little pay value associated with it, but it's really high on the service and mission-oriented components. And that's how I satisfy sort of that itch to make sure that I'm engaged in helping other people where otherwise they may not be able to find help. That specifically is important to me as well.
There's a book called 9 Lies About Work. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
It kind of goes at some of the sort of commonly held perspectives, like we should do feedback or whatever. There's a specific thought though in the book. They talk about sort of imagine a tapestry, but there's this red thread woven through the tapestry. And if you think about your life and your career, that red thread is the part that really motivates you. So for you, it is service.
Right. And
how much of your time has to be the red thread time? And they actually do a little bit of study to figure it out. Their answer, I believe, is 20%. So, you're thinking about your own career, or you're thinking about coaching somebody up, and they have this thing they're super passionate about. And you might look at your org and say, that's not a full-time job here. But can I find you 20% to keep that passion, give you that energy, and weave it into your world? Something I think about a lot.
That's interesting. So I work for a big technology provider, and they have a policy around something they call 20% projects. And now that you mention that, I'm absolutely certain that that's where that percentage came from. In terms of additional projects that an employee is allowed to engage in that may be outside of their direct line of work. So that's interesting. Mention the name of that book again. So
9 Lies About Work.
Okay, fantastic. Do you remember who the author is?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah.
It's on
Okay.
my desk, but it's
Now,
10 feet
okay.
away.
Now, folks will be able to Google it and they'll be able to find it. That's outstanding. So, another interesting facet of, I think, the initial conversation that you and I had was about the size of the organization that you lead. I proffered a really bent analysis, or I dug somewhere deep in my history about it, something I thought was a principle, but you had the exact words about it, about sort of the size of organizations. And I think you centered on the number of relationships that you're actually able to hold within any particular organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that theory so
Yeah.
that we can sort of expand on that?
Yeah, so there's the theory is ideal tribe size. I think if you Google it, you'll find it on Wikipedia, and there's books written about. I think Dave Logan wrote a book called Tribal Leadership that talks about this. But the fundamental concept actually comes from the study of primates and how many relationships we typically can manage with our primate brains. And none of us are very far removed,
Right.
genetically from that. But it's an extrapolation, and you wouldn't want to take it too far. So this concept gets thrown around, I think, kind of casually at work. Somebody reads a book or they hear about this idea, and then they're like, "Look, we're too big. This is dumb. We're doing it wrong. Whatever." I don't know. I try to take it pragmatically. There's something to be said there. We all know if there were 1,000 people in my company, I cannot have a real relationship with all of them.
Right.
It's logistically impossible. There's some suggestion there that it's physically impossible. So what is the number, and what is the consequence of that? Maybe the number is not 150, maybe it's 175 or 200 or 250, but it's not off by 10x.
Right.
And so what are we going to do with our organizational structures when we start to get near those numbers? What are the signs that we're starting to fall apart there? Because leadership is really about, in my opinion, study of human nature, your own first. Can you understand yourself, your own triggers? Can you understand other people?
Fantastic first point, understanding yourself. Know who you are when you enter the room, as I like to say.
Yeah, and your relationship with other people is really about attention. Right. And you as the leader, like, you have to realize at some level, all of the people who are your directs, they want your attention. So how much time do you have? And how much energy do you have? And how many actual relationships can you do that with? And what is a realistic number? And what will you do when you need to start crossing over those limits, right?
Mm-hmm.
You asked earlier, maybe sort of the benefits of like what we have stumbled on. Well, one of them is because people feel an ownership, because they understand they're supposed to carry the culture forward, and they've been invested and they're supposed to invest in somebody else. They will then do the same thing. So I invest in them. I pay attention to them. I listen. I have a real relationship. They in turn can do that for 10 other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is the only way we can hope to scale, I think. Even if you're a multinational, right? Like, there is still a chain of relationships and attention that is cascading down. And that chain's going to break in certain places if people are not in the right state of mind, or they're not prepared, or they don't know how to do it. And so anyway, I'm rambling.
No, this is all, again, to me, very, very interesting. When I envision, the idea of starting my own company, I always think about keeping it tight and small, because I feel as though if it gets to be too big, I literally have lived and been a part of some massive institutional organizations, and I've seen how the distance between management, supervisors, leaders can really be elongated at certain levels of that institutional leadership. So much so that there's no way that you could expect to have personal, direct relationships with people across all levels of the organization. One of the things that I did as an executive in the bureau is that I tried to form direct personal relationships with folks who were working on the teams that I was responsible for leading, just so that I could get an understanding as to what their motives, agenda, like priorities, talk to them about family if they had family, so that I can get a sense as to who these people were and the types of things that were driving them, so that when I led at the level that I was leading at, it was important for me to understand, hey, so-and-so's having a personal family crisis. Well, guess what? I know that individual. I know his spouse or partner. I understand what the issues are. Not only that, it makes me, I think, more empathetic around situations that arise. Hey, give that person what they need in terms of time off and that kind of thing. And it makes a difference because I think that it's easier to say no to people that for whom you have no contact with. If they're just a name on a spreadsheet and just a number in the company, it's easier for you just to sort of manage from an authoritarian, sort of dictatorial vantage point without taking into consideration who that individual is. Any thoughts on that?
So many. One of the oddities of SEP in this modern day is that we're strictly in person, no hybrid, no remote.
Okay.
Which is a whole podcast episode on its own.
Right.
I'm not here to tell anybody else that's how they should lead or run their organization. But what is clear to me is if I'm in a meeting and somebody's struggling, somebody's having a hard, like I know I can see them and I can catch them in the hallway after, like, hey, are you okay? Mm-hmm. Seems like something's bugging you, right? We can have those. If we're in Zoom calls all day, am I going to Slack you? Hey, can we do a Zoom call after the Zoom call? So I got a question. Right. It's just a friction, and you know how hard it is. How hard it is to have the relationships. How hard it is to get out of your own head and see what's going on for other people. And I think this modern world, where we're so distributed, boy, we have really amped up our difficulty level here to try to run organizations and lead and in this way. But I think sorry, I want to go back to something you said. So yeah. You're talking about having those personal relationships, right? And so as the organization gets bigger, you can't. So what do we do? Well, we all will put our mission statement out there. We'll put our guiding principles. We'll use OKRs. We'll have all these ways to attempt to communicate something, our rocks, choose your model. And it's not enough. And we know that. We see the consequences of it. Right. So then we have to like, it's a layered approach, right? It's like a defense in layers. What's that called? You're in cyber. Defense in depth.
Layered defense and depth are both appropriate terms.
So we have to do the same thing in the other direction.
All derived from the military, by the way. Yeah.
The original experts on organizational leadership, truly. Yeah. But so how do we do? Like, I build the relationships that I can. I set the culture. I communicate what I can. Then I model the behavior. Right. And then I try to get the leaders next to me to model the behavior to their folks. We try to spread the opportunity to do things like whatever your models are, whether you like peer groups or coaching, or you like behavioral assessments, like make those tools available, like just layer on top of layer on top of layer, all pointing in roughly the same direction. And then you have a fighting chance, right? Yeah. It'll be imperfect. It's inefficient. But you work for a very large organization. The things you're doing, the scale you're working at, there's not an option to be a 140-person company. It's just not on the table.
Right.
And the things you do are important. So going to have to take these other approaches instead.
Do you do anything annually with your executive team, your direct reports? Do you guys take retreats? Like how do you get the direct leadership formed around annual goals, sort of priorities?
We do an executive retreat. We've developed a nice set of rituals there. We'll go away for a couple of days, get a cabin in southern Indiana, curate a list ahead of time, and then really, really dive in and make sure that we're tackling that stuff. We also, you got to have a cadence to that. Once a year, twice a year is not enough. So we have a weekly meeting we call study hall. It's not a status meeting because we're in there to work. And so a particular issue might come up, or there might be a policy that needs work, and we're going to sit down and work on it during study hall.
That's interesting.
But it's a chance to really try to get some stuff done. And this is a stupid pet trick, the tactical level. But the number of times you're in a meeting, there's 10 minutes left, and somebody says, "Oh, we should do some." Yeah, that's great. I'll go take a first draft, and then they're going to email you the draft. It's going to sit in your inbox. Maybe you'll see it in a week. No. Take the 10 minutes. You'd be shocked how much you get done.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So we'll do that a lot. And because you're probably not crafting something for which you haven't thought about at all. So you get 60% done, and then you have some momentum. Anyway, I digress.
No, that's a great little nugget, I think, to pass on to listeners. I may adopt that myself because I have found that I don't know if that's most of the time when I ask someone to take that away and then come back, it's because I'm drained from the meeting time. But maybe there is something to be said for that that lag time at the end of the meeting to actually be productive and get something done. Yeah.
Well, that's an insight. Maybe I am torturing the people in the meeting. The other people are they're in that mindset. And they're like, oh my gosh, Raman, don't do that to me.
No, and I think what it boils down to, at least in my case, is individual work preferences. Like I would much rather go off, work on the draft, and then bring that to the next meeting and have everyone, and serve it as a pre-read, but have everyone dive in and then add their 2 cents and critiques in a much more robust fashion. But there is absolutely something to be said. Maybe there's a middle ground for what you suggest, and sort of taking into account people's willingness to spend the extra time engaging.
I have another question for you.
Yeah,
I'm not a podcast host, but I'm a wannabe. So I've listened to several episodes of this podcast.
Okay,
fabulous, great guests. I'm flattered to be here. Candidly, you've asked a lot of questions about character.
Yes,
and I won't steal it for you. Like, can we go into that?
We can. I was brought up, I think, in a time very similar to you. I think generationally, we actually share the same generation background, where I just thought character, and certainly my experience professionally, having gone to one of the U.S. service academies and then spent time as an officer in the Marines, and certainly my time in the FBI, I just thought character has always been a huge, huge component of what it means to be a good to great leader. I don't think you can divest character from the individual and have people who are great leaders but have poor character traits. And I don't know. I think there are certainly some challenges, specifically in the technology space, that I think challenge that just a little bit. And I'm fascinated as someone who was sort of brought up that this core thing of good character was a component of leadership. And there are a fair number of instances where we've seen, again, in the technology space, just wildly successful undertakings by companies. And it's been described by many that the leadership of those companies have been less than desirable in terms of sort of their personal characteristics and how they lead. And I think it's something that's quite frankly only seen in the technology space. I think because, and there's, again, probably worth another 1 or 2 different podcasts worth talking about in a different setting. But I'm just fascinated by the idea that maybe there is room to divest how people operate, how they interact with one another, and their ability to be good leaders. And when I say good leaders, drive outcomes that are important to a wide group of people. I don't know. I just think it's a topic that's worth continuous exploration. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm going to be careful that I don't get myself in trouble. This is not a political statement.
No. This is not about politics. This is about
no.
Yeah. This is, again, my observation over time. Yeah. My observation over time, again, is that I was brought up thinking that character was just this. If you didn't have it, you weren't going to be a great leader. And I think that there are some examples out there in the world that challenge that principle.
I see the same ones. So here's my observation after really watching the last election. We could broadly classify people into 2 groups who care about the what and people who care about the how. And what I mean by that is the policy is all that matters to me. Or we might say in the tech world, the results are all that matter to me.
Right.
And they're not being insincere or lacking integrity. Yeah. That is how they are wired. That this person gets results and that person doesn't. It's very clear one is right and one is not. And there are other people for whom the how this person conducts their business, whether I agree with their policies or not, is everything, or the thing. And to me, that's ultimately character, right? The how is the character question.
Yeah, or a component of it for sure. Yeah, maybe the largest component. But if I can take your point and extrapolate, what I think the observation has been is that a lot of people care just about the what or the results. It is the end state that people are desirable of, and maybe again for a point of exploration in leadership and other realms. It's worth studying that to understand how maybe there's been a shift, or maybe all this amplification about character was, I don't want to say it wasn't real, but maybe there's been a shift, both culturally and otherwise, that people are much more interested in outcomes rather than how we get there.
This is truly speculating. People say follow the money, follow the incentives, right? So I wonder, is this ultimately an incentive problem? People value the performance at the cost of all else, because the incentive is a return or influence or something that's important to them. Sure, so they're just following their incentive, and that incentive is powerful enough to say, I'm okay with these things happening.
And that's the thing that I postulate in terms of what I've seen in the way of leadership in the technology space. My proffer to folks who are interested in this topic, and this may be the topic of my leadership branding that I end up going to the mat on or going up the hill for, is that I think that in the technology space we are absolutely concerned with the what. This is a results-oriented culture. And in the how and the nuances, I think, matter infinitely less, specifically because the returns are so outsized when compared to any other industry. And by returns, I mean stock value, compensation packages, all of the things that you take into account that serve as incentives for either individuals, groups, or institutions. I think the technology space is absolutely worth studying, and that's kind of the work that I'm engaged in with the leadership student.
I do feel like I need to caveat. I am 100% with you on the character piece. I think a lot. I have 3 sons. I think a lot about if I did something for which I would then have to face them and be embarrassed after years of telling them to be a good person, to do the right thing, to work hard, and then I have to face them. It's intolerable.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And I'm absolutely certain I share that sentiment with you. I have 3 children, and raised 2 boys who are now men, and finding their way out in the world. I got a little girl at home, and I'm constantly thinking about. At the end of the day, what characteristics or things am I amplifying to them, both explicitly and implicitly? I think about that constantly, and maybe that's an individual preference or thing, but yeah, certainly it weighs heavily for me.
And it's no different at work, right?
Right.
Obviously, we don't have a parental relationship with our peers,
right?
But we influence them.
Yeah, you model behavior, and you do things that people are watching and that people pick on. Certainly, in your role as the CEO of a company, you have to. I would think people are constantly, whether you know it or not, looking to you as an example, and they will pick up on things, and then they take those observations and they embed that into how they engage and react to company policy and things like that, depending on what they see from you as an individual. That's absolutely true. And I know that, again, having been at lower levels and institutions, again, 2 of the biggest in the country, certainly with the Marine Corps and the FBI, those cultures, I was watching the leadership of those organizations, and I either wanted to amplify what I saw from them, or some of the takeaways sometimes were, I don't want to be viewed or seen the way that I'm viewing that particular leader. One last question for you around the pathway for you. If I'm being transparent and sort of making an observation that maybe you've made, where do you go from being the CEO of your own joyful outfit? You've got, again, this is a personal taste. When I see you, one of the reasons I want to have you on the podcast, I think you are in what might be considered an ideal leadership situation and scenario. It sounds good. You're running an employee-owned company, which we didn't even dive into at all. I think that adds a whole different flavor to employee performance in a company. From your vantage point, what's the journey look like from here to the next phase or state for you?
Yeah, I'm. As you watch the most significant digit of the age go up, you start to appreciate the end is coming, And there's a practical aspect to that in technology in particular. Yes, I was in the trenches, but my experience gets less and less relevant every day. And there'll be a moment where I am holding us back. I know that. And so I got to see that exit, and I got to do the right thing. Executives are typically treated well financially. Part of the point of that is so that you will leave when it's time to leave and leave gracefully and leave the place better than you found it. Mm-hmm. I've been taken care of. This company has done great. Everybody here, we've built this thing. So there'll be a time when, and I mean, it's already happening a little bit. We're not close to the date. Nobody freak out. But step by step, giving up responsibilities, making sure that I'm not the bottleneck, and growing other people, giving them room to grow themselves, and making sure that next vision is there. And then being worst case, break glass in case of emergency, or a helpful consigliere for the next person who leads.
Right.
But we think about being a 100-year company. I got to make sure I model that and exit gracefully and leave us, continuing on that trend.
Well, it sounds like you're doing all of the right things. I applaud you guys. I fascinated by your personal leadership journey. I think it's for my listeners and the folks, I think that for whom this topic of leadership resonates, I think a lot of people will pick up on the elements of the conversation that you and I just had. Are folks free to reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Absolutely.
I would highly recommend it. And again, I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I hope that we can find ways to collaborate in the future. But thanks for coming on the podcast.
This has been great. Thank you very much.
All right. Outstanding. That's it, folks, for this episode of Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. This is MK Palmore, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks again, Ramon.
Thank you for listening to Amplified, the Leadership Student 2.0 podcast. If you're ready to elevate your personal leadership and drive your team's success, connect with Apogee Global RMS for custom coaching and development solutions. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of impactful personal leadership strategies. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and empowering those around you. Together, we'll amplify your success